So there's a 3-pin disconnect here. Just pull that apart. There's a 9-pin right here. That has to come apart. Okay. That stays there. That stays there. Alright. There's also a 1-pin disconnect for the air conditioner. And then the last thing you gotta do is loosen up this big nut for the ignition. And usually they're just snug, so. And this will just stay back there, out of the way. Alright, so now this is all disconnected here. I can take these last 3 screws out and the whole panel will come right here. Alright, I'm going to give you a little update about what I just finished doing. I was told I should probably start narrating to help you guys figure out where things are in the time code. Alright, so I started by removing the seats. There's seat stop on the left hand seat rail that has to come out first. Slide it back. You can pull out there's a connector for the airbags that need to get disconnected on some models. This one has it, so you have to take that apart, then you pull the seats out. The next thing I did was take out all the radios and the MFD and the PFD. All the radios used a 3/32 Allen. If you have a 55X in there, it'll be a 5/64 Allen. Let's see, the MFD, when you pull it out, uses a posi drive screwdriver to get the connector out. Posi drive for all the connectors on the PFD. Disconnect the pitot-static, don't forget that. Pull those guys out. Let's see, what was the next thing I did? Oh, then I took out this part. Well, no, first, then the next thing I should have done first was disconnect the battery. That's what I did over there. So disconnect battery number 1, then you can pull out the switch panel. 2 screws, pulls out, 3 connectors come off, that comes out. Then the next thing was the bezel cover that was on here. Let's see, there's the 2 screws here. Usually there's screws underneath that hold it on, and then there's one hidden behind the glove box that has to come out. That one gets missed a lot and people break it, so just watch out for that. Those all come out. Then the next thing was the standby instruments that came out. The 4 screws here, there are spacers underneath them behind the panel, so be careful when you take those screws out because they can drop down into the belly, so just catch them as they're coming out. And then there's a screw on this side that you have to take out. When I took this out, there's pitot-static lines that have to get disconnected. There's a connector for the attitude indicator, and there's a couple lighting plugs that have to come out. So those come out, and then this whole thing can come right off. Then the next thing I started to do is work on taking this rack apart. There's 518 and 517 connectors are on top. They just squeeze and pull off. There's a number of coax connectors you have to disconnect, and the flight director is this silver one. Let's see, so you got, there's 2 GPS coaxes and a COM that have to come off. There's also these other 2 big connectors. One is for audio, I believe is the P521, and the P550. 550 is your autopilot harness connector. The transponder coax that's in here, if it's this black style, I just cut it because we're going to be replacing it anyways, rather than trying to disconnect it. The COM though, you want to disconnect that, the GPS as well. They're just B and C connectors that come right off the back. Then the next thing I did was open up the breaker panel. Screws down here to open up the breaker panel. That opens up. There's a plastic insert inside that has to come out that has a few screws, and there's also this connector at the bottom. This is P520 right at the bottom. This is all the power that comes into the main radio rack area that has to get unplugged. On this side, you have a nav. This is your nav antenna connector that attaches to your nav splitter that's inside the rack. That can be a hard one to get to. Same with COM2 on the bottom. That one's really hard to get to. You kind of have to work the rack out to get at it. So I took all 3 screws on each side of this to loosen that up. And then these 2 screws, or 4 screws rather, 2 on each side have to come out. And then there's 2 screws on each side that have to come out in the back. And then you can slide the rack forward a little bit. You can start disconnecting things, pulling the rack forward. On this side, this is the encoder harness. You have to disconnect that. The marker beacon coax goes down and there's a disconnect below. This particular install had a GTX 345 installed in it, and these 2 lines go down to the Skywatch for some functions there. There was no disconnect on these, so I cut them and I put some tape on them to mark them so I know what they are for later. And then that's it. Pull the rack out. Good to go. The next thing I'm going to do, and then I started to take apart the panel here. So I took off the knobs. Use a heat gun on these guys because there's glue that holds them on. If you heat up the glue, it loosens it up, pops right off. So yeah, I'm going to keep on going with taking apart the panel, and I'll try to do better at narrating as I go. Alright, so these screws here, they have spacers behind them as well, and it's an 1/8 inch Allen. Sometimes the spacers are stuck to the backside. These ones are. I'll just leave them there. Yeah, they come off. There's an air conditioning. There's a little LED for the air conditioner that has to come off. To get this off, you have to loosen the nut on the back of it. I can't remember what size it is. I think it's a 5/16. Nope. 1/4 inch? Nope, not that either. Alright. It's gonna be an oddball size. I think it's a 9/32. Yep, that's it. 9/32. just kind of loosen up that nut a little bit, and then it just pulls right out the back. This side, these three, same thing. There's spacers behind them. I'm actually going to disconnect all that stuff first. Today I'm going to show you how to remove the old turn coordinator, the blind mounted turn coordinator under the co-pilot side panel. So up under this kick plate is where you're going to find it. So there's 5 screws that need to come out. There's these gold cadmium plated screws that have to come out. And they're just a Phillips. And sometimes they're pretty tight. Okay. Now, we should be able to get to where we need to get to. So this guy, I can probably just... Oop. Nice one. Okay, there we go. So I'm just going to squeeze these connectors off just to get them out of my way. There, now we got lots of space. So you should be able to see the turn coordinator in there, hidden away in the back. And it uses long, oh, got the wrong size. You're gonna need a 5/64 Allen key to get the screws out because they don't use regular Phillips. But they should just be regular clip nuts on the back, like on a regular instrument. And they are. And then that connector back there is going to get bagged and tied up into the main harness. So let's move you here so you can see it. Come over the top here. You should be able to see down inside there. You can see there's the harness. So I'm going to tie that up. I'll put a bag on it, zip tie it, and tie it up into the harness so it doesn't get interference with anything, and that'll be the end of that. And here I am just showing you, I got this harness is all tied up here. It's not going to move around or cause any issues. It's not going to fall into the controls or do anything like that. And there you go. All done. Okay, so now we're going to be showing you how to remove the STEC altitude transducer, which is this silver, or this rather this gold canister looking thing here. Sometimes they're gold like that, sometimes they're blue, but all it is it's a small 3-pin connector here, and then there's a tube here that connects to your static system. And this just, for the old STEC Autopilot, the 55X, it just senses your altitude as it goes, but with the DSC-90 install, this is no longer needed. So what we're going to do is we're going to remove it. It's easy to do. All you're going to do is the first thing is unplug the connector. We'll bag that, tie it up. This static line we can disconnect here, and all that's going to be, just get this in position. Okay, right there, good. Alright, for that, all this is just a 9/16 wrench, and all I'm going to do is disconnect. Oh boy. Disconnect the, well, I always call them Tygon tubes, but you could call them Nilo Seal. These plastic lines that connect. I'm just going to remove this T completely, and I'm going to replace it with a union. So we're just going to reconnect these two with a union like this. Obviously, I'm going to tighten these up. Now you got to be careful when you're tightening these plastic fittings. You want to make them snug, but not too tight that they crack, because you can easily do that, because these are just nylon. And after I'm all done, we'll do an IFR check on this to make sure there's no static leaks, but that should be good. And then the unit itself, so now this is completely disconnected from the system. Very simple. There's 2 screws, one on top, one on bottom, and there's just nut plates on the back side. So try not to drop the screws. And the location of this thing is right underneath the PFD, kind of in between the PFD and the MFD. Just underneath here. A little awkward to get to, but not too bad. Alright, there we are. Removed. Okay, and then the last thing we gotta do here, just take a plastic bag. You can use, you can use whatever you want. You can put some heat shrink on there or whatever. Usually just plastic bag, and I'll zip tie it up. And there we go. I don't have some cutters with me, otherwise I would cut the tail off the zip tie. That's that. The next step of what I want to do here is remove this TAWS harness cable. So if you follow this cable up, it goes around over here. It's this overbraided harness here. And right here, if you follow it up, there's this big connector here. You can just disconnect this connector and this harness will come out. There's a smaller, this is the main harness here, and then there's a smaller one that has the power and the ground. It comes over here to this other connector here. So disconnect that, remove it from this clamp, and then that harness can be out of your way. Okay, so the next thing I want to do, this is the TAWS connector harness. If you were to trace this harness up, it goes over here, goes to this large blue connector here. You can disconnect that, and then there's another smaller line that follows all the way over, and when you follow it over, it comes over to this 9-pin Molex connector that we removed that was attached to the back of the annunciator panel over here. That can go away. And once you've got that out of the way, that's just one less thing in the plane you don't need. The other thing we can do, this right here is the old flight director system. Somebody's already bagged the connectors for the old 55X flight director. So that goes to this relay block, and if you follow that harness around, it follows around behind the main trunk here, and it ends up going over to this silver connector. That can be removed as well. So I'm going to go ahead and do that now. doing here. So I'm just taking the last of these off. It's just a nut and a washer for this clamp. So I took that one off. There's one right here that I just took off, and that one right there. So this is that 9-pin Molex that goes that way, and then goes over here. Let me set this down. Alright, 2 hands, that's better. There it is, the whole toss harness can come right out. Alright, so then the next thing is this flight director. I took the 2 screws off holding this relay block on, and I'm going to work on getting the rest of this harness out now. Okay, so this morning I'm going to show you where the Airspeed switch lives for the traffic box. So that's it right there. You can see those 2 yellow tubes. One is pitot, one is static. We're actually going to be, you got 2 options. You can either leave the Airspeed switch in there, which what it does is it provides a ground when you go above about 40 knots or so. And that ground will tell the, that ground discrete will tell the Skywatch box that you're flying, and then it will start to alert you about traffic and stuff. That can be used also for the Skytrax and for the AXP322 to tell it that you're now in airborne mode and to start transmitting your altitude to air traffic control and all that stuff. So everything is done with that Airspeed switch. Now, the thing with this Airspeed switch is a lot of times they fail. I mean, they just get old and they're worn out. It's a mechanical switch in there that it can wear out. So a lot of times you'll see Cirruses coming in and they'll be reported, the pilot will report that the Skywatch box is providing traffic callouts when they're just taxiing around on the ground, which tells me that that Airspeed switch is no longer working right. So we either have to replace it, or in this case, the IFD 540 can provide a weight on wheels output that will do the same exact thing. And that's all based on GPS ground speed, which in my mind is much better. So what we're going to do today is I'm actually going to remove that Airspeed switch, and I'm going to continue, or I'm going to keep the integrity of the pitot-static system by taking out the T's that are there and replacing them with unions. And then the 2 wires that you see there going to the Airspeed switch, one of them is simply going to airframe ground. The other one is the signal line that goes into the Skywatch. We're going to reuse that signal wire and we're going to feed it to our Skytrax into our AXP322, and then that line will also get fed into the IFD 540 weight on wheels output to make everybody happy. So that's what we're going to do today. There we go. This one with the longer tube is the pitot line. Not that it really matters, as long as you do one at a time, it doesn't really matter. Now obviously once I'm done with this, you know, we're going to be doing a lot of stuff with the pitot static here, but we'll be doing a full IFR inspection on the whole thing to make sure that we don't have any leaks and that everything is reading properly. Now one thing I should point out, that if you're ever taking these apart, let me take this off so you can see it. There is a little plastic insert that needs to be inside the tube. When you take the B nut off, there's a little plastic insert that gets pushed into the tube. That needs to be there. If that's not there, this thing is not going to seal right, because that basically acts as your flare. So if you don't have that, that's probably the source of one of your static leaks. And if you've ever worked on these planes before, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. Let's see if we can get the light in here a little bit. So they are labeled. I don't know if you can see it. It's very hard to read the labels sometimes, but the one, let's see, we are looking at, it looks like ANSK 927. I think that's right. So that's going to be our weight on wheels output, input to the Skywatch. The other one is the same, or similar, but it ends, the important thing is that the last number, the last digit in the number, wire number, is an N. That N means it's a ground. So the one that ends in an N, we can just cap that one because we don't care about it. The other one though is the one we need to splice to our Skytrax and our AXP322 and bring it down into the IFD. So that's what I'm going to do next.